Hi everybody and welcome to How Gay Is Your Grinch? Maybe not. Hi everybody and welcome to the Zachary Daiquiri, where today we're going to be exploring the queer coding of the Grinch and how this queer coding impacts the audience's and the Who's responses to his character, notably his immorality and even his villainy. I'm wearing my Grinch fur, I hope you are too. What's for sure is that the mayor of Whoville is not wearing his, because of course this is his reaction to the Grinch's fur.
He had hair. Not pleasant. He shed. Not right.
What's clear from this scene is how the Grinch is animalized, dehumanized by the mayor, and also by other critical commentators from our world living on our snowflake, this one in particular likening the Grinch to a green gorilla. The queer coding of villains in cinema is by no means a recent phenomenon. Indeed, it is a trope which is used at times to suggest that the character's evil is a product of their homosexuality, as it usually is, or even just an accoutrement. This queer coding of villains is linked to superficiality, glibness, general psychopathic tendencies as well, which we see depicted in The Grinch.
I'm a psycho. Danger! Danger!
I propose, therefore, in these queer-coded villains, that the deviant sexuality, that is to say homosexuality, is inextricably linked to their devious nature, in what I like to call the deviant because devious theory. Consider the long hair protruding from the Grinch's fingers as if long fingernails. Consider the Grinch's cross-dressing too, from the point of view of Judith Butler's gender trouble. Gender ought not to be construed as a stable identity or locus of agency from which various acts follow. Rather, gender is an identity tenuously constituted in time, instituted in an exterior space through a stylized repetition of acts. That gender is performed, re-performed in these iterative acts proves to us that sex and gender are never truly materialized in the body. This continuous process means that sex can be undermined, re-articulated, its power called into question. This is exactly what the Grinch does, as we see in these clips. In this theory, therefore, gender becomes a cultural and social construction. There is the tacit collective agreement to perform, produce, and sustain discrete and polar genders as cultural fictions. I propose that, just as the Grinch sees through the commercialization of Christmas and the gift-giving associated with this period in Whoville, the Grinch also sees through the cultural construction of gender. Behind gender, behind present giving at Christmas time, is essentially an exchange system of signs, which, in both cases, the Grinch views as entirely meaningless. In this way, the Grinch does not participate in either, instead mocking, deriding, and subverting norms in the Grinch's use of different masculine and feminine-coded imagery, and also in the Grinch's luxuriating in the waste of the presents that the Whos have been using and abusing. Incidentally, the importance of Mount Crumpet as this waste deposit of Whoville will be explored in a future video, so look out for that one around Christmas time. Whether conversing with the echo of Mount Crumpet or playing up to Cindy Lou Who, the Grinch is always surrounded by an audience, at least in the Grinch's own mind. Fourth wall breaks abound, therefore, and consider this important one in which the Grinch's desire to drop sizes, not in terms of the body but in terms of the heart, is linked not only to a specific feminine trope in cinema, but also to the Grinch's hatred, immorality, and therefore villainy.
Yes! Down a size and a half!
And this time, I'll keep it all.
The Grinch, a born thespian, takes on roles from a director to a crash dummy. A protean being, one can never really put one's finger on what the Grinch is, and that will be the next chapter of our video. But just before we get there, let's consider how the Grinch's theatricality is often queer-coded, even homosexual.
Kiss it, Whoville! Uh-oh. Somebody's fabulous!
The Grinch, as we've described this progressive character, does not fear then breaking the taboos of Who society, which does seem to be oriented around the family, specifically the nuclear family and the heteronormative family. But what's of interest, of course, is how the Grinch was raised by perhaps Whoville's only lesbian couple. We'll explore the birth process in Whoville, as well as the Grinch's upbringing in a non-heteronormative household in a subsequent video, but for now, let's move on to our next chapter. We'll be exploring a global understanding of the Grinch's otherness in Whoville, as reported by local media. The Grinch represents what the Whos are not. The Grinch dislikes Christmas, which of course makes up the great part of Whobilation. The Grinch, therefore, is the contrast to the ideal Who. The Grinch makes up a part of Who society, as we'll see, taking up even a place in the mailroom, but the Grinch is excluded generally from Who society, written out of history in a sense in the Book of Who itself, which, as an artifact, we'll consider in another video. Is it a Bible? Is it a constitution? It's very difficult to make out, and in general, it seems as though the mayor himself is the one who wrote it, because he has such a personal vendetta against the Grinch. He clearly is writing himself and the Grinch into the Book of Who. What? But what's in a name? Is the Grinch a name given to the Grinch by the Grinch's parents? But it causes so much dismay in Who society that it seems to be even mythic in nature. Is the Grinch rather a scapegoat for Who society embodied by various different beings? What could it be? Leave your answers in the comments. What is clear is that Grinchiness is some sort of a sin in Whoville, and also where the Grinch lives, Mount Crumpet, is a threshold marking and delineating the boundaries of Whoville. The Grinch, as we'll see later, lives in an area near Whoville, which is Mount Crumpet itself, and I believe the Grinch's nature is embodied by Mount Crumpet. It is the threshold of being, outside of which we have objection. Abjection, as we'll see in a following video, ties in very nicely with Judith Butler's theories of gender. The Grinch represents, for Whoville, the constitutive outside of their society, bolstering their sense of self by exclusion. The Grinch is not, therefore Whos are. The first way in which this exclusion becomes linguistically apparent is when Cindy Lou Who asks her dad about this green gorilla, if you like, and tries to work out what exactly is the Grinch. A Who or a...
You see, Cindy, the Grinch is a who, well, is actually not a who. He's more of a...
A what?
Exactly, honey. And he's a what who doesn't like Christmas. Take a look at his mailbox, sweetie. Not a single Christmas card, in or out.
This division between a who and a what is really the division between a subject and an object. The Grinch referred to not as a who, but as a what, despite making up part of Whoville society, and part, therefore, of Whodom, generally, is considered an object. We notice, too, that in the Who's press, the Grinch is referred to by the pronoun it, and not human pronouns such as they, them, or he, him. This is not a celebration of the Grinch's gender-fluid nature, but, in my opinion, a dehumanization of the Grinch, who is not permitted the human pronouns shared by the rest of Whoville. But as we see, the Grinch is not even part of Whoville, living instead in an area near Whoville. It is also striking and of the utmost importance that local media reports that the Grinch is a beast of mythological proportions. Consider this description of the Grinch in light of the Book of Who's commandment.
I don't need to remind you that this Christmas marks the 1,000th Whobilation.
Whoville's most important celebration.
And the Book of Who says very clearly, every size of Who we can measure knows that Whobilation is a time we must treasure.
Leo Bersani, building on Simon Watney's analysis of responses to the AIDS epidemic, writes that the great power of the media is, as Watney writes, its capacity to manufacture subjectivity itself, and in doing so to dictate the shape of an identity. The general public is at once an ideological construct and a moral prescription. This is exactly what is at play in the Who's local media, as the ideological construct of a Who is delineated by the empirical evaluation of being able to measure a Who. The Grinch, therefore, of mythological proportions cannot be measured by the same yardstick as a Who, and therefore is excluded from being a Who. I hope you've enjoyed this exploration of the animalization, the objectification, and the queering of the Grinch, all three of which come together to stamp the Grinch's body as other, to mark it as non-Who, and therefore to delineate the constitutive outside of Who society, bolstering the Who society, while at the same time excluding the Grinch from activities taking place within Whoville. It's been a pleasure to have you along for the ride, and I'll see you in just a few days for the next video, where we'll be exploring in much more depth abjection, Julia Kristeva, therefore, but also the birthing process in the Grinch, the lesbian household in which the Grinch was brought up, and